to you. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I hope everybody is doing well this morning. I hope everybody is doing wonderful and that you have gotten a measure of rest on yesterday evening, last night, this morning. I am talking today about cash, capital, and credit. And today we're going to be talking about two things concerning the Black financial experience and the Great Recession, which happened in 2008. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about credit from our book, Your Score, An Insider's Guide. An insider's secret to understanding, controlling, and protecting your credit score. And if we have time today, we will introduce our new add-on for Fridays, Wealth Can't Wait. Avoiding 7 wealth traps, implementing 7 business pillars, and completing a life audit. So this is going to be our new add-in book on Fridays called Wealth Can't Wait. All right. So we're going to start out with our historical part. Good morning. Good morning, Pastor Ben. We're going to start out with our historical part on the Great Recession that happened in 2008. We're going to talk about the Black financial experience. And as I said, as we are learning to be better stewards of what God has given to us, we do need to understand our history, our context, and how that plays into us building, accumulating, maintaining, and passing on wealth. All right. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Hope you have something to drink. Hope you have a pen and paper in hand and get ready to take some notes. And the reading that we're starting out with is coming from The History of the Black Dollar by Angel Rich. And we are just about done with this book. She does have some other pieces in here about current African American founders, but we're not going to be going into those pieces. I really, with her book, I wanted to focus on the historical pieces she has placed in here and the economic pieces that she has placed in here concerning our history. So the Great Recession. Half of the collective Black wealth was stripped away during the Great Recession of 2008. The Great Recession, spawned by the housing crisis and falling stock markets, was universally hard on America, but none were affected more than the Black community. Even as economic recovery has begun, the wealth gap continues to widen. According to Pew Research Center analysis of data from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, white net worth was 13 times higher than Blacks in 2013. The recession destroyed the net worth of all families except for those at the very top. Unprecedented wealth destruction coupled with high unemployment provided the perfect storm to demonstrate how essential emergency savings are to the long-term financial safety of a family. There are numerous factors contributing to the widening of wealth gaps. Median income for Black households dropped 9% since 2010. Thus, minority households have not had a chance to replenish their savings as much as whites. Given that they are also more likely to experience financial emergencies and pay higher fees for those emergencies, it becomes even harder to gain footing on an equal playing field. Additionally, financial assets such as stocks recovered much faster than housing. Whites are much more likely to own stocks directly than minorities, making them better positioned during the recovery. And remember, the capitalist code book that we talked about the importance of owning stock and of building your wealth in that arena and not just leaving your wealth up to real estate accumulation, right? The racial gap in the home ownership rate was practically the same in 2000 as it was in 1990, 25%. As whites increased their home ownership rates, blacks moved to the inner cities where their rates remained low. Black home ownership rates inclined during 1960 to 1980 when the gap was at its smallest, but even then it was substantial. The return on home investments is far higher in white families than blacks. Home equity tends to rise higher for whites than in black homes. Historic segregation helped to lower demand for black people's homes, placing a ceiling on home equity for black homeowners in urban communities. Whites tend to be more likely to receive and provide inheritances to assist their next generation in home ownership. At the very least, they are more likely to assist with a down payment for their friends and family. With family assistance, larger down payments are usually made by white home buyers, rendering lower interest rates and therefore lower closing costs. Access to credit and credit scores also play a strong role. Thus, white families began buying homes 8 years before black families on average. And remember, there was a point in this country when black people could not buy homes at all. All right? So, or it was a very, very, very limited amount of black people that could buy homes at all. So we have to think about that in terms of where wealth is housed, right? How wealth is stored. And if it's stored in real estate and you are locked out of a real estate owning market, then that automatically puts you behind in some areas. Home ownership is usually the largest investment for any American family. More than half of black wealth, 53% in fact, comes from their home, compared with 39% for whites. The home ownership rate for white families is 28% higher than for black families. Since historic discrimination and access to capital prevented blacks from owning homes, the black community are more recent home buyers, more likely to have higher interest mortgages, and more likely to be headed by a single parent, and more likely to not pass it down to their children. Obviously, black people are far more susceptible to foreclosure than others because of these reasons. Half of the collective black wealth was stripped away during the Great Recession, resulting from the lack of equity and high prevalence of predatory loans. Worse, Latinos lost 67% of their total wealth. Since 2007, 11 million homes have been foreclosed on. After adjusting for income and credit scores, it remains a fact that blacks were unfairly and disproportionately given bad loans to begin with. These foreclosures not only impact the immediate families that live in them, but bring down the entire neighborhood. This mere point led to a $2 trillion in lost property across the country, half of which was attributed to black ownership. Income impacts whites much differently than blacks. For every dollar made in the white community, it increases by another $5.19. And there is no significant impact on their years of home ownership. In the black community, that dollar barely doubles at 69 cents, and their home is the most important factor in their portfolio. This is largely due to black people dominating fields that are less likely to have things like 401k plans and other benefits. Experiencing more emergencies, blacks tend to keep the cash they need on standby as opposed to white people who tend to invest their disposable income already having emergency savings. So if somebody were to say, well, what is the basic step for me to get ahead of the curve? First, establish an emergency savings. And of course, as we already read in the Capital Code book, the Capitalist Code, make sure that if you're a part of a company that has 401k savings, that you are trying to meet the maximum matching goal of that company so that you're putting more aside. It goes without saying that white families on average begin with significantly more money and higher incomes than the average black family. When blacks and whites start on an equal playing field, their returns begin to mirror each other. In these scenarios, black families see a growth of $4.03 for each dollar of income. While most Americans no longer inherit money, whites are 5 times more likely to inherit money than blacks, and for the amount to be 10 times as what blacks receive. Inheritance is converted to wealth more readily for white than black families. Each inherited dollar contributed to 91 cents of wealth compared to 20 cents for black families. College education is critical to economic success and wealth building. Education is supposed to be the great equalizer, but it's not. Remember, it's education, access, and opportunity. Family wealth is the largest indicator of educational success. Without this factor, success primarily is dependent on the quality of K through 12 education. And guess what? If you have a poor quality K through 12 education, or you're in a place where they're closing most of the schools, or you live in a place where all of the schools are D and F rated, then they automatically put you at a disadvantage. Or you're living in a school, or you're going to a school that has poor materials, or that has low quality teachers, meaning that many of the teachers may not even be degreed. Some of them are not certified, or some of them are just coming out of college, or they're maybe using substitute teachers in the place of having full-time staff because they don't want to pay the salary costs. So you have all of those things happening in education. Obviously, with historic segregation, blacks tend to be isolated in lower quality schools. For instance, in DC, where I am, and I see it up here, the District of Columbia once boosted a rate of 90% black students. During this time, DC schools were ranked 51 out of 51. They were ranked last in the nation. Cost for higher education has risen by 60% over the last 20 years, with the average student loan debt toppling $35,000. 80% of black students graduate with debt, compared with 64% of white students. For these reasons, whites are much more likely to graduate than their undergraduate counterparts. Blacks more often than whites are forced to leave school to earn an income that will help them support them and their families. Over the past 30 years, the gap between students who earn bachelors from low-income families grew from 31% to 45%. Affluent families spent 5 times as much on college for their children as low-income families from 1972, and by 2007, that figure rose to 9 times. Marriage also plays a role in widening the racial gap, wealth gap. Interestingly, marriage helps to increase wealth for white families by $75,000, but has no significant impact on blacks. White marriages seem to combine medium wealth profiles to push whites past emergency level savings and into investments. Black marriage tends to combine much smaller levels of wealth, and sometimes it just combines debt, thus having no impact on the new total family wealth. So think about that. So when people say, or when people talk reparations, which we have talked about before, this is why I often say that if you're going to talk reparations, you also need to talk about reparations on different levels. Reparations, how does that look in terms of education? How does that look in terms of housing? How does that look in terms of investments? There are so many ways that Black Americans are behind in this country that need actual, logical, policy-driven redress, excuse me. And so when I see Black politicians, because this is going to be my conversation with anybody I vote for, when I see them, I'm going to be asking, while they're campaigning, how do you plan to make some forward progress on the area of economic redress, specifically for Black Americans, descendants of slaves who have been in this country, who are living very disenfranchised lives, the majority of Black Americans in this country? What is your plan for that? That is my question. Because at some point, we have to stop electing people just because they're Black. Or we have to stop electing people just because they look like us. When someone elects you, they need to know that you have a plan and that you have a desire to represent the people who put you in office. All right? So that's my main question. It has been too long that there's a bill sitting up there that wants to address reparations for Black Americans in this country. What do you plan to do about it? How do you plan to move that bill forward? If you don't have a plan, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep asking somebody who does. That's the way I feel at this point, because this is ridiculous. All right. So the Black financial experience. This is what President Barack Obama had to say. I've been consistent in saying that, this is a legacy of a troubled racial past of Jim Crow and slavery. That's not an excuse for Black folks, and I think the overall majority of Black people understand it's not an excuse. They are working hard. They're hustling, and they're trying to get an education, trying to send their kids to college, but they're starting behind oftentimes in the race. Now, many people do not want to criticize President Barack Obama. I'm not one of those people. All right? I do believe that President Barack Obama, with all of his intelligence and smartness and ingenuity, could have done more to move forward the progress of Black Americans in this country. But money talks. And so we have to understand the agenda that he moved forward was the LGBTQIA agenda. They were his main financial supporters, so he moved their agenda along. But again, it goes back to how much wealth is in the Black community and where's that wealth going? And have we come together as a collective to pool our resources to begin to put our money behind candidates who will actually focus on issues that are necessary for Black American empowerment, improvement, and forward progress. Barack Obama was given lots and lots and lots and lots of money by the LGBTQIA lobbyists, people who lobbied for things to get done for them. So they were first on his agenda. Now, how much of what he did for them will be rolled back by this current president, we're not sure of yet. But he did try to move their agenda along. So let's read. Today, only 5% of Black households have a net worth of above $350,000. Only 5%. That's not a whole lot. Less than 1% of Black families have over $1 million in net assets. So when people say we have a lot of millionaires that are Black people, the facts are Less than 1% of black families have over $1 million in net assets. The average white family has a net worth of $116,000. Sadly, when you deduct the family car as an asset, the average black family in America only has a net worth of about $1,700. Even worse, 40% of blacks have zero or negative net worth. These figures are decreasing, not rising for blacks. In 2009, the average white household held a wealth of $113,149 compared with $5,677 for black families. That is a huge disparity. In 2012, Angel Rich, the author of this book, conceived of the first African American financial experience study at Prudential Financial. It was the first time a financial services company had conducted a primary research study to understand the financial attitudes, perspective, and behavior of the black community. The study contained many groundbreaking results, including the fact that blacks owned more life insurance than other races at an equal or higher value. They learned financial literacy best through their churches and was 3 times as likely as whites to withdraw from their 401k, and 1 in 3 desired to be entrepreneurs. So that's actually good that 1 in 3 of us have realized that a part of our wealth building for our community is going to come from entrepreneurship. This spawned a conversation about economic inequality and marketing for those who were really trying to figure out how to now sell financial products to the black community. In fact, New York Life launched a $50 billion 100-year plan to go after the black community. And Morgan Stanley ordered a copy for every single employee globally. Other companies like JP Morgan Chase partnered with organizations such as the Center for Global Policy Solutions to discover innovative ways for reducing economic inequality in the black community. Shortly after, Angel Rich founded her company, The Wealth Factory, and conducted another research study sponsored by the Charter School Development Corporation. The study revealed key components that lead to the wealth inequality gap in the black community and providing real solutions for closing the gap. It was presented and adopted by the Department of Education, as well as the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking. Now, what will happen with this plan, now that we have new administration, now that we have people who want to roll back time and bring us into Jim Crow and black codes, time will only tell. But if it's any indication based on who's running the Department of Education, we need help. And I don't just mean physical help, I mean divine help. All right? So she did establish and she did create policies that our government began to take on, but that was in 2011. All right? Some of the most important discoveries include the impact of gamification on learning financial literacy in underserved communities, especially amongst people with special needs. Rich also highlighted that affluent children spend 1,200 more hours in novel locations or places outside of their neighborhood, gaining exposure to a myriad of things that blacks are not usually exposed to, or if they are exposed, they're exposed later in life, emphasizing the need for more field trips, summer enrichment experiences, and travel around the world. 1 month later, Congresswoman Maxine Waters released her report, building on her long history of economic development and bringing the topic to the nation's attention. Her findings also mirrored Rich's report and gave further credence to best practices for closing the wealth inequality gap. Meeting Angel Rich at the release of her report, the Congresswoman then invited her to her office. They met together and she received full support to use her name as needed in movement to close the racial wealth gap. Since then, several evaluations of black and white wealth in America have been produced. The National Urban League released The State of Black America, compiling data to create indexes. And Pew Research then released data detailing the median net worth of Black families compared to whites. There are roughly 120 million American households, with 14 million of them being Black. Just 1.4% of the top 1% is Black. 16,800 homes. Their median net asset worth is 1.2 million, while 10% of white households, totaling 8 million families, have more than 1.3 million in net worth. A recent study by the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances released shocking to some figures that made it unequivocally clear how small the number of Black families there are that actually have access to wealth required to send their children to universities, start business, or put money down for home loans for their children. So when I hear Black people who mean well say things like, Black people aren't trying hard enough, all right? What you are in essence doing is you're insulting people's intelligence, and you're insulting their understanding of history and the ways that our country has deliberately created wealth gaps by suppressing Black people for generations. All right? So, is it possible for Black people to come out of a place of disparity? Yes, it is possible. But you also have to understand what you are up against. All right? You do have to understand what you're up against. So, if you're white and have a net worth of about $356,000, that's good enough to put you in the 72nd percentile of white families. But if you're Black, it's good enough to catapult you into the 95th percentile. Only 700,000 of the 14 million Black homes have more than $356,000 in total net worth. So we have a lot of thousandaires, more so than we do have a lot of millionaires in the Black community. William Darity, professor of public policy, African and African American studies, and economics at Duke University, told the Duke Chronicle that, quote, the major sources of wealth for most of the super rich are inheritance and in-life transfers. We don't have that advantage because we were the inheritance. Understand? Our ancestors were the inheritance for the super rich that they now transfer from generation to generation to generation. And it is important to understand that. The big reason is racial differences in access to resources to transfer to the next generation. He went on to say that the practices of enslavement violence, Jim Crow, discrimination, and dispossession of property have kept generations of African Americans from accruing, gaining, and keeping the type of wealth that whites in the top 1% have today. Because I also hear the argument of, well, why do Black people, why do we keep talking about this? Why don't we just build our own? And I have to come back and say, well, technically, we have built our own. Just do the research. We have built our own cities, our own towns, our own communities. And as the report shows, there has been a dispossession of property. How did that dispossession of property happen? It either happened through racial terrorism, all right, which is to come into a community, terrorize the people, kill the business owners, kill their heirs to the business, burn down communities, burn down businesses. So there was either a burning down of those communities, or there was a dispossession or stealing back property and lands, which is actually still going on. They're doing it right now with the Gullah Geechee population in South Carolina and in Georgia. They're doing it now to a couple of friends of mine who own several acres of land who are black farmers. It's still happening. This is what people don't get. Their land is still being stolen. There's a dispossession of property that continues even into 2018. All right. So let us stop beating up on black people as if they are not trying or have not tried to start their own or accrue wealth. All right. The reality is they have been fought every step of the way for every generation. According to Matt Brunig of demos.org, white families hold 90% of the national wealth. If you hold 90% of the national wealth, it is stored within your community. That makes it nearly impossible for someone to move past that unless they go outside of this country to begin to build wealth, or unless they tap into the global market in order to build wealth. So I just want us to understand that if white families hold 90% of the national wealth, you will have to think globally in terms of building your wealth and your capital, because 90% of the wealth in this nation is stored. All right. And that's a part of conserving or conservatism. That means to keep what you have and not allow anyone else access to it except for the people who look like you. Okay? I want us to understand 90% of this wealth in this nation is locked into the hands of one particular group of people. So if you want to build wealth, think globally. All right? Think outside of the country. Think about products that you can be creating and producing that you can sell online in a true free market economy where you can reach people outside of the United States to sell your products to if you want to build wealth. Hispanic families hold 2.3% of the national wealth. But here's what's different between Hispanic families and black families. Hispanic families also have a strong political lobby, and they vote as a bloc. Something that Martin Luther King warned us about and encouraged us to do 50 years ago, maybe more than 50 years ago. So they vote as a bloc, even though they don't hold a lot of the national wealth. They exercise their political power by unifying around the needs for their community, and then they support candidates that focus on the needs of their community, and they vote as a bloc. So when you know you don't have a whole lot of national wealth, your other option is to focus on coming together, unifying, and using your political power where you can. Blacks hold 2.6% of national wealth. 2.6. While there may be the decadent veil, where a small group of wealthy black celebrities and athletes are highlighted in the media, that's called the decadent veil. In other words, it is the veil of a few black celebrities who make a lot of money that keep the illusion going, or keep the veil over your eyes, that the majority of black people in this country do not make that kind of money. All right. So if you never heard that term before, that's what it means. It's a small group of wealthy black celebrities and athletes who are highlighted in the media as, see how well black people are doing. Why are they complaining? Well, it's called the decadent veil. There are a few doing that well. It could not be further from the truth for the race as a whole. It is also clear that access to opportunity by color has had a lasting effect on history and continues to dictate the future. Thomas Shapiro, author of The Roots of the Widening Racial Wealth Gap, followed the same households for 25 years, finding that their total wealth gap nearly tripled, increasing from 85,000 in 1984 to 236,000 in 2009. He feels the biggest drivers of the growing wealth gap is years of home ownership, household income, unemployment, higher education, inheritance, family support, and pre-existing family wealth. The number of years of home ownership is the largest predictor of wealth gaps growth by race. Most fascinating, Shapiro was not able to find a common thread of what underlies the ability to build wealth, including the notion that personal attributes and behavioral choices are key pieces. Instead, evidence points to policy and the configuration of both opportunities and barriers in workplaces, schools, communities that reinforce deeply entrenched racial dynamics in how wealth is accumulated and continue to permeate the most important spheres of everyday life. And this is why I'm going to continue to say education plus access plus opportunity equals wealth. It's not just education, all right? And what his study proved, that policy and opportunity and barriers that were put up were the determinants of how much wealth that wealth gap began to widen. All right. So for all of the self-help life coaching gurus out there, all right, who say, well, if you're just more this or you're just more that, or you change your personality or you do all of these skill things, then you will have more money. The evidence shows that it didn't have anything to do with skill. It had to do with policy. All right. Policy and opportunity. Policy and opportunity. Because I can have all the skills necessary, but if I'm not let in the room, if I'm not given an open door, those skill sets don't really do me much good outside of the door of opportunity. All right. So lastly, data for this derived from the panel study of income dynamics, a nationally representative longitudinal study that began in 1968. The compelling evidence-based story is that policy shaping opportunities and rewards where we live, where we learn, where we work, propels the large majority of widening racial wealth gap. Again, the other thing I always say is racism is spelled Policy. Dr. Claude Anderson said racism is first economic. So you put those two together, all right? And if I have policies that restrict your opportunity for economics, then that becomes the basis for this racial wealth gap that divides, but it also is continuing to grow. The general policy direction of trying to increase demand for Black labor in local economies is sound, but much more policy experimentation and research needs to be done to determine how best to improve the local economic climate facing Blacks, as stated by T.J. Bartik of the Upjohn Institute in his technical report, Economic Development and Black Economic Success. So, wealth building. Get your education. Build your skill set up. But opportunity and access are the areas that we need to work on as a community. So whether that is creating opportunity and access for each other, whether that is creating opportunity and access by building our own businesses, whether that is developing what I call a economic ethos, that I'm going to look specifically and intentionally for Black businesses to buy from and support. Okay, Black people who are who start tech businesses, that I'm going to look for opportunities to invest in those tech businesses. I know at one point there was a Black television network that was starting up, and they were offering, I think they were offering stock only to Black people first. They opened up and they were offering their stock for Black families to purchase first. So things of that nature, people having to think outside of the box when it comes to building wealth. You know what's against you. You know the odds that are stacked. You know how policies have created disparities. So now we say, what do we do now? How can we combat that? How can we support our own communities? How can we begin to pour the wealth that we do have back into our own communities, right? So that that wealth begins to circulate within the community. And don't think, excuse me, and don't think that as you do that, don't think that you're not going to have opposition. All right? So just factor that in there. Just factor in, if I become a staunch supporter of Black businesses, I'm probably going to have some opposition to that. All right? Look at the celebrities who are staunch supporters of the Black community and watch what happens, watch what is happening to their notoriety in society. Watch what is happening to their ability to support Black businesses financially. There are a couple of people now who either have been stained in their career, right? So now all of their methods or ways of producing income have been shut down. All right. And some of them deservedly so, because they've actually committed crime. So I'm definitely not advocating for that. Then there are people who are trying to have other avenues of income outside of the system, especially in music and entertainment. And now they have been brought in to give depositions. All right. So we have to understand the larger picture, that if you're a person that is earning huge amounts of money in this country, and you have any possible ability to help the Black community, just understand that somebody is going to try to come along and make it very hard for you to earn income in order to help your community. Because the reality is, as long as you're earning income and you're not gearing that income towards the empowerment of Black people, you will be fine. All right? But if you are, I just want you to be aware that you will face opposition. So we're going to take our last about 15 minutes here, and we're going to begin chapter 3 of Your Score. Building the perfect credit profile. It should be absolutely clear by now that your credit data is getting sliced and diced to an infinite degree by every creditor or potential creditor. They're judging you and using big data to predict how you're going to handle your financial life over the next 2 years. I put up an article yesterday on Daring Dialogue and on my other page to talk to you all about Amazon and how Amazon is now they're shutting people out of their online marketplace. Now you have to understand how serious that is, because some of everything is sold through Amazon. But one of the things they decided is you could get dinged for returning. You could get dinged for returning items that you order through Amazon. You can get dinged for returning items too much. And then it was some other things in there, some other stipulations, like if you gave a kind of an off the wall reason for your returns, then they could actually close your Amazon account. All right. And one of the companies talked about how there are certain places now that actually give you a score based on your risk of return, based on your history of purchases that you made at a store. So everybody is collecting some sort of data on you, and they're rating you based on your reliability to buy an item, to keep that item, or to see whether or not you're going to return it. China is rolling out a social credit score, which is going to contain not just your financial stuff in that score, but it's your social life and a couple of other pieces that they're adding into it. And they said, based on this score, they're going to determine who gets certain things. They're going to determine if you get access to like dating sites and all of this, just a whole bunch of different things that you may be denied based on your social credit score. So where are we going with all of this? Well, the scripture makes it plain. They could neither buy nor sell except they had the mark. I know people are looking for somebody to come and plant something in their hand or in their forehead. But listen, they have enough data on you already to start determining where they want to place you in their social market. All right. And we've just read how they feel and what the data shows about Black people in this country and whether or not we have a certain amount of wealth. All right. Understand that kind of stuff can be used against you in the future should our country want to go to a numbers only system. All right. So they're judging you and they're using big data to predict how you're going to handle your financial life over the next 2 years. So when they look at your credit score, they do it and they examine it and they say, what is this person going to be doing with their money the next 2 years? That's a given. If you're going to be categorized by the consumer credit industry and that characterization is going to dictate so much about how you live your life, you need to understand how you're going to be evaluated. With that information, you can then build a rational, realistic strategy for putting yourself in the most favorable classification you can. You have something to shoot for. If your credit scores are your financial fingerprints, your overall credit profile is your entire body of work. Your scores are a snapshot of your financial life. Your profile is the set of choices you make to get those scores, and it's the combination of the financial and personal benchmarks you're meeting. When you go to apply for a mortgage, your prospective mortgage originator is certainly going to pull your credit scores to take a look at your credit worthiness. But they are also going to ask you a variety of other questions and will also check a variety of other sources to obtain a more expansive view of your credit profile. Your scores count, but so does your profile. And therefore, if you're a Black American in this country, again, you're already at a disadvantage as a collective group, which is why Blacks are generally given a higher interest for mortgage rates. It's discriminatory, or at least it was. But apparently, this past week, our president overturned all of the restrictions on discriminating against Black people in the banking industry when it comes to housing. So again, policy has now been overturned for banks and lenders to go back to discriminatory practices against Black people. All right. So if you haven't been keeping up with the policies that's been coming out of Washington, I'm going to need you to subscribe to somebody and pay attention to all of the different policies that are being rolled back that were to combat discrimination, that are being rolled back to basically say, oh, it's okay for you all to do this. All right. So I'm not interested in a tea, cake, and hat party. I'm interested in, is anybody informing us of the policies that are being rolled back that's going to make our lives difficult? Because I don't want to shout off of that. I don't need an organ for that. I need somebody to fix it. I know. I'm in trouble. I know. So, many of our conferences, especially believers, many of our conferences need to contain some components on what do we do now that these policies are being rolled back. Financial literacy, credit scores, mortgage lending. Please add that content to your next men's or women's conference or family conference, because we need to know what to do now that these policies are being rolled back to make us achieving wealth that much more difficult. Your scores count, but so does your profile. Your scores show how well you've been able to pay your bills and manage your financial life in the past, and predict how well you'll be able to continue to do so in the years to come. Your profile lets lenders put you in a box with millions of other consumers with similar financial characteristics. There, they can see how well those other folks handled their financial responsibilities and how profitable it was for the lender to do business with them. What makes up your credit profile? It's a combination of factors. Some are very straightforward, such as your income, stability of employment, stability of residence, liquid assets, and age. And please keep in mind that if you are an entrepreneur, when it talks about stability of income, this is one of the issues I have with credit scores, is it kind of disparages entrepreneurs. Excuse me. It kind of disparages entrepreneurs. So you have to know that going in. All right. Those of you who are starting businesses for the first time. So it deals with stability of employment, stability of residence, liquid assets, your age, and your income. Your income and liquid assets give an indication of how easy or hard it would be for you to pay off a loan. When you're getting a mortgage, more liquid assets and more of a down payment mean you have more skin in the game. So those of you who are getting ready to buy a home, all right, and people will tell you, well, just bring in the minimum amount of money for your down payment. No, you want to pay down as much as possible you can for your down payment. Why? Because it means that you will have more skin in the game and you'll be less likely to walk away from your payments. And this is a good credit indication to your lender. Lenders like that because it reduces their risk. Job stability and housing stability show that you're able to build productive and long-term relationships, which is exactly what a creditor like a mortgage originator is looking for. Your age can have either a sliding benefit or demerit. The reality for most 55-year-olds is that they don't have 20 more years in the job market. So if you are 55 and signing up for a longer term mortgage, that is a factor the lender is going to take into consideration. If you're 24 and you don't have much credit history, even a higher income isn't enough to overcome your lack of a track record. Other factors are less transparent. Like your credit score itself, your credit profile is influenced by the kinds of debt you hold. You're rewarded for having a variety of debt flavors, such as installment loans, revolving debt, mortgage debt, because it shows a lender you're able to manage different kinds of expenses on a steady month-to-month basis. It also provides more data points to the lenders, algorithms to measure you by, and more data means more accurate assessment of risk. Thinking about your financial decisions in terms of how they will affect your credit scores is fine in the short term. But to have long-term success, you want to transition your thinking into considering what your credit profile is and what you want it to be. With a strong credit profile, you'll have the ultimate freedom in your financial life, and that is the freedom of choice. When you can make decisions on your own time and with the right information, you're in a much better position than the person who is finding that they are forced into a particular course of action out of fear, frustration, or a simple lack of better alternatives. So we're going to stop there today, and we're going to continue next week talking about how to build the perfect credit profile. Remember, in this life, there's two words that we need to learn: data and policy. Data and policy. All right? A lot of what we see is being driven by data and policy. That can be data about you personally, or data about your demographic in this country. And the data that they find is oftentimes driving the policy. So when it seems like Black people seem to be penalized more, or as our community calls it, the Black tax, where it seems like we are charged more, even though we have less to work with. Data and policy. All right. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I have been your host today, Shantae Charles. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so please go out today and be light. We will not be in service on Sunday. We encourage all of our online partners to make sure that you are spending time with your family this weekend. We know it's Memorial Day weekend. We know people have events planned, so we will not be in our Sunday services, but we encourage you to spend time with your family, spend time ministering to your family, spend time having these kind of conversations with your family. All right. We are going to be doing, we will have prayer on tomorrow. We will probably do an audio recording of our time in prayer, so you can look for that in our SALT sessions. We'll probably go live and do our audio prayer, but we're going to be out praying for our community, praying for the policies that we see happening in our country. We're going to be praying for the White House administration, because they need prayer, because what they do affects the nation, whether you agree with them or not. So we need to be in prayer for what is happening in our country regarding our leader, regarding our relationship with world leaders. We're going to be praying for all of that. We're also going to be praying for financial breakthrough. We're also going to be praying for the spree of things that have been happening, criminal activities and behaviors that have been happening, that have been geared towards Black lives. So we're going to be praying for that on Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we'll be doing some personal missions on Saturday, which we won't be recording because we don't record everything that we do. All right. So we will not be on Sunday. Again, minister to your family. Take that time to engage your family. If you know that you're going to be around your multi-generations, take that time to invest in Generation Z. We know this is graduation season. Take that time to celebrate your next generation, those who are graduating, getting their education, moving on to higher education, completing education. Make sure you celebrate the people who are in your life. All right. I want to thank you again for your time and attention. I might be on Monday. I will definitely let you all know if we will be on Monday. I'm not quite sure yet. I might still be traveling. But if not, you will see me on Teachable Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, I want to thank you for your care, and God bless.